so happy we alive.
Good evening, and welcome to Louisville Late Night. This evening we're in beautiful San Francisco, California. And
Are the questions in here okay?
No!
Okay, well that's going to be really hard to summarize. I think what he's saying is that he thinks that the religious defense in a cannabis case would have a better chance were there a popular understanding of ecology and the relationship between people and plants. And so I would say that definitely seems to be true. It's a long-term process. And left out of the discussion so far during the question period, with like the land use question, is the kind of the formal way that the courts decide these religious cases. And so they go through the burden goes back and forth. So first the burden is on the person who is saying that, hey, I'm a religious user of cannabis. So you have to prove that you're a sincere religious user. Then you have to prove that the prohibition or whatever it was that the government did substantially burdened your religious practices. So if you can do that, which a lot of times the government will just go ahead and concede, but sometimes they won't, then the burden shifts back to the government. The government has to prove, well, it was justified to prohibit your use. And what they do there is they present what they call a compelling state interest. And by and large, judges, who are the people who are going to make the decision in these things right now, will sit there and say, you know what, yeah, I think that there's a pretty compelling interest to prohibiting cannabis. It's, the gateway drug, it's dangerous, it's the whole litany that they have been told by the government. And whether they believe it or not, they've got something that they can write in an opinion that kind of justifies where they're going. So there's the formality of how these things gets sort of broken down, even under the RFRA, is, it poses a big problem. I think it's going to require somebody like the UDV, which has gotten in there and kind of establish one step of the way in the process of proving one of these cases. I think that there's going to be a number of cases that are going to have to come along that incrementally, bit by bit, chip away at the edifice that is there right now, because all the precedent is bad, other than this UDV case and maybe one other case.
Okay, question over here.
Yeah, I'm thinking along the lines of how to promote a religious freedom. When I looked at the medical marijuana law in California, what I would really like personally to see added.
Comment on that, which is that's one area I think that drug law reform should take another look at and examine, which is that the way that drugs are scheduled right now, originally Congress, when they scheduled drugs, just go ahead and put them wherever they wanted to put them without having to pass the tests that they now have to pass if the DEA wants to schedule a drug. And the only criteria that a drug is examined on is the medical, whether it has medical efficacy and then whether it's dangerous. But drugs have, up until the last century, had many uses besides just their medical use. Religious was one of them. People for time immemorial have used substances to boost their creativity or just to get centered, to release stress, things that might not formally be considered medical. So I agree that at some point there needs to be, and it could look very innocuous. It could look like, Section 21 USC Section 811 is hereby amended to add that in addition to medical use, there will also be a consideration of, spiritual use or something else that's fairly, isn't going to get the whole drug war. They're not going to be blind to this, but I think that somewhere along the line there needs to be a push made that says drugs are not just medicines for sick people. And in some ways I think that the cannabis medical marijuana thing fits into that in a bad way.
Do I go to my county supervisor and ask them, or do I go to my state representative, or do I go write a letter to the president? I mean, as an average citizen, where do I go first and say I would like someone to recommend? I mean, just go up to the political set that you guys have ordered.
Sure.
Sure, I would recommend not writing a letter to George Bush, because that's not going to get you very far, but trying to get change at the state law level. If you try to get change at the county level, it's probably going to be ignored, just the same way that this personal use of marijuana initiative in Mendocino has been ignored, or Measure Z has been ignored in Oakland. These things pass and they have broad popular support, but the police simply don't enforce them because they claim that state law trumps. And so I would say go to your legislature. Now for something like Prop 215, it took a vast concerted effort of the voters, and the legislature didn't do it. It was the voters. We did it. And it's because these politicians are not going to get reelected on a soft on crime platform, and that's what their opponents will accuse them of if they seek any cannabis law reform. So I think it's really, start getting voters like yourself together. Start a grassroots campaign, and that has a much greater chance of success than writing to your distant representative in Sacramento. And that's my take on it.
Yeah, I have another kind of a thought of a different attack, which would be maybe we should do something like have somebody sue the Catholic Church for providing alcohol to minors. Let them fight that out, and then whatever they use to win that one, then we take that. Pick out some whatever kind of a right-wing church you want, and see what the parallel is, and then go after them and let them defend it, and then we can build off of that.
I like that. That's a cool idea. I think I go with I like both those ideas. I think that it's a matter of trying everything you can and having the energy and the belief that as dark as things look, freedom does evolve, and it's clear when you look at the law over time that human rights are opening up. You can see it from civil rights, from women's rights, from reproductive rights, gay and lesbian rights. Things that were not recognized as fundamental rights now are. And I think that this idea of cognitive liberty it's a next step. It's the idea that who should decide what a person is allowed to think and how they think. Clearly, there's no freedom if you can't control your own consciousness. And I think that that's going to be the next kind of unfolding of human rights that are legally protected.
Okay. Over here, gentleman in black. That's you. Yep.
I got one contact with that. With the statements about the war on religion being the war on drugs and war on
our county council to make rules for the police so that, of course, they have medical marijuana now since the year 2000, and the police had to be trained how to deal with a medical patient. Now they also train the police how to deal with a religious user of cannabis. It's on the website of the Hawaii County Police Department. It was signed by the police chief and the mayor about 4 years ago. It's a pretty great victory, really, on the local level. The police, we don't do the be silent when you're arrested for religious use on the Big Island. We're really proud to say we're a religious user and that this is our sacrament, and the police are required to write down our statement. They're required to accept our ID cards, our plant tags, and our sanctuary signs in our greenhouses and our homes. And that becomes our defense, is built in. So it's our way out. And I recommend if you want to work on the county level, that's one way that it might be effective. And pro-action is certainly the way to go.
And I agree, there's a difference between the laws that are on the books and the laws that they are enforced. And we see it right here in front of us. The San Francisco Police Department has better things to do than enforce these ridiculous health and safety codes that are still on the books. And so that is a way to have some legal reforms on a de jure basis. You're not changing the actual laws, you're changing the enforcement of the laws. Gentlemen in the suit back there?
Yeah, I'm curious if there is any legal distinction made between cultural rights and religious rights, because really what we're part of is we're part of the only truly global culture. And medical use and religious use, nutritional use of cannabis, and smoking of cannabis for recreation, it's all part of a cultural identity that's been around longer than any other global culture. And to recognize it as